All right, and we are live here. A special Tuesday edition before Thanksgiving this week. Excited to have Ryan Joyce coming back on the show to join us, catch up. It's been fast and furious several months since we last spoke. Bumped into a couple conferences. Since then, it's fun to see you guys and the tactics that you're employing at the conferences. Really seems like a strong group, a team, a gang of guys that are out there on a mission trying to solve some problems. Unique tact there, but know you guys are growing, coming out with new products, fighting fraudsters and all that good stuff. So, maybe we can start there. We'd love to hear what the latest is, what it's like trying to bring on new customers, grow responsibly, hire new folks, and I don't know. I was listening to your interview with Andrew Silver recently, and you come from a CIA background, right? You're not a freight guy at your heart, so I know you're always absorbing new stuff, new information, and trying to learn while also doing all these crazy cool things. So, glad to have you back.
Thanks, Casey. Good to be back. I think the last time I was on, it was like episode 7 back in June or so, and you guys are 23 episodes later. So, great on you for continuing this going. I know it's not easy putting out content, tracking down guests, coming up with things to say. But for those that are sitting at their desk right now, like trying to get that last, spot load covered before they head off to family tomorrow, I'm sure they enjoy listening in. So hopefully we have some folks. And by the way, I'll put it out there, like we can talk about anything and everything on this. And we're, happy to open it up to anyone who's listening and wants to throw out a question here or there. We can get into it. It's been a busy time for GenLogs. Back in June, we hadn't even finished our platform yet. And so we were still figuring out like what's the way forward with regards to specifically what we're going to build for customers. We finished that around the June timeframe, put it into some customers' hands end of July. And then it's been a wild ride ever since. We've been growing both in terms of new customers and the team, and have brought on, we're now past 30 people in the team, which is just kind of hard to believe. But it takes an army to accomplish what they have. And I'm so proud of what they've brought together. For those that don't know what GenLogs is, what we're doing, at its very core, we are putting sensors all over major interstates and highways at all of the major freight lanes. And we are collecting on all trucks as they pass by, and then using computer vision and AI to pull out a whole bunch of data about those trucks, and then stitching that all together to get a really rich tapestry of how trucks move around the U.S., their patterns, all the above. And so there's certainly cannot do it alone, and super proud of the team for bringing it together. I'm really curious, you mentioned I don't come from freight. I absolutely don't. And I love learning every day. So one question I'll have from you, kind of being in this industry for a little while, at least knowing it pretty well, is it's my sense that freight never sleeps. That yes, we are in Thanksgiving week, there's a holiday in 2 days, and yet it's also getting to peak holiday season. There's going to be a lot moving on the roads. As a broker, does a broker get to take time off, or are they on the clock all the time?
Freight never sleeps, man. Even when I was at FreightWaves, that Craig says our customers are working, right? The trucking companies, the logistics companies are working. Somebody's got to deliver the turkeys. So we're going to be in the office too, in case anybody needs our help on the media or the sonar, the tech media side of things. So it does seem to be the case, right? I mean, it's tough world out there for freight brokers, but
I think that's what I actually really appreciate about this industry. And in terms of, I see every day there's so much crossover from my previous career at CIA and freight here, and just the littlest ways. I mean, I spent many a Thanksgivings and many a Christmases away from my family because I was working, and the work had to get done. The terrorists are always plotting. There's, intelligence that needs to get gathered. And so I was certainly working at that time. I see very similar. I know in past holidays, my team has tried to take a little time to be with their families. but always have their phones nearby with Slack on there, because inevitably as a software company, there's things that go a little weird, bugs that need to be fixed. And while we try to like not be there 24/7 in terms of needing, like we want the stuff to work perfectly. When it doesn't, we have a great team that hops in to get it done. And I think that I've respected seeing that in the industry with other brokers that I see from a service perspective, working so hard, even on the holidays and nights and weekends and whatever, to deliver for their customers. That speaks volume for those brokerages out there.
Yeah, for sure. Shane Gregerson in there in the chat confirming, yeah, freight never sleeps. Love to see it. It's interesting. It brings something up for me. I remember reading, I've read a couple of books written by Jocko Willink, who seems like you're familiar with him. He's gotten into management consulting, into business after, leading SEAL platoons, I believe, in Afghanistan. One of the things that he was a part of was, I think they started changing their tactics for rounding up terrorists and started working at night. Taking advantage of the night vision and all the cool tools and intelligence probably that guys like y'all were gathering and sharing with guys like them. Did you get a taste for? I mean, you respond to emails any hour of the night, text messages any hour of the night. Is that something that's translated for you guys as you try to speak the customer's language, be kind of behaving on the same level that they are? Did you learn how to work at night when you were overseas? Is that something that makes you guys different over there? And how does the team break down? Kind of part 2A to the question here. How's the hiring gone for you guys? Are you plucking folks just like straight from the intelligence community, or are you getting a nice mixture of folks from, the transportation industry as well as the intelligence background? Would love to, just learn more about that. What makes you guys tick, and a little bit about the behavioral stuff that may translate to our industry.
Yeah, well, I'd say we definitely worked at night a lot when I was in the intelligence community. In fact, most of us have a day job, especially if we're undercover. You kind of have a day job and then you have a night job, and so you're working two jobs.
Yes. Have you seen The Americans?
Yeah, The Americans. I know it well, and it's actually a great show from a perspective of,
right.
Obviously, there's Hollywood infused in there, but from a perspective of the psychology of living undercover, incredibly captures it well. And also some of the tradecraft in there is pretty spot on too. They must have had some good CIA consultants kind of working through what it's like to go out when you're making sure you're not being followed to do the operations. I will say, just kind of vernacular, and I always found it was funny. We worked very closely with the military, and Jocko, former Navy SEAL, they don't refer to it as the night. They refer to it as the period of darkness. And I always thought that was like actually pretty cool. Period of darkness between the 26th of November, 27th of November would be tonight. And they'd go out and do their flurry of operations. We would definitely be supporting them as they were doing that. And I got great respect for the military, guys like Jocko and others. In terms of like how we've approached hiring at GenLogs, it really was, we were screening and continue to. I mean, we joke about in GenLogs that we have an iron door, a titanium door at the gate, so to say, and we will not let either investors or people in to work at GenLogs unless they're a specific type or breed, and that is someone who's extremely humble, very high performing and hardworking, extremely smart, and hungry. Like they want to go change an industry, how it's, something's been done. But that humility piece is so critical, because what we didn't want is know-it-alls that came in that was like, well, I know how it should be done. Because I can tell you, from someone who did not come from freight, I do not know how it should be done. And so I think we were trying to find the happy medium. We didn't want to hire only freight people. I think it'd be really hard if you were at a big brokerage to then walk into a competitor brokerage and be like, let me tell you how you're all screwed up and how, this needs to be done. That is not what we wanted to come across as. We wanted to have extremely high levels of humility to walk in and say, I have no idea how your job is, but I do know intelligence, but I don't know freight. So let me try to understand freight so I can bring intelligence, and together we can make what's called freight intelligence and give you a really great heads up in terms of what's happening on lane activity out there, shippers, what are carriers, which ones were in business until 2 weeks ago when they went out of business, and all of a sudden their MC was sold. But we have some indicators that indicate, show that happened and can get advance of potentially some of the fraud that is happening out there. So we were really prioritizing people that were just hungry, humble, smart. I think there's a book literally titled that. I've never read it, but that's what we were looking at. And we have, though, hired out of the intelligence community as well. So we're kind of bringing, and we've now just hired our first freight hire, someone that came out of the industry. So it's bringing together freight and intelligence and building this freight intelligence platform.
Love it. Humble and grateful. It's funny. That's what is one of the mottos on the Jacksonville men's lacrosse team here. My girlfriend is the director of operations there. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something that has been a theme on the show. One of my favorite guests so far, I think you know him as well, is a guy named Prasad Golapalli, right? Yes. If you're building tech in the space, you're selling to brokers, and he being a guy that's done this a couple times before, you're much better off listening to the experts, right? Listening to the broker and figuring out how your solution could best solve their problem, as opposed to pushing folks stuff on folks that may not fit from a timing perspective. It's really interesting that could you tell me a little bit more about what made you decide to start GenLogs? I know you had a retail background as you got into the out of the intelligence community and into the private sector, but we'd love to learn a little bit more about what you're thinking on, at least what the impetus was to start GenLogs and get you to where you guys are today.
Yeah, for me personally, I certainly I felt I had an entrepreneurial side of me that I just couldn't quite hitch when I was at CIA. And so I made the decision, it was a difficult decision, that I was going to leave and go pursue that. I ended up joining a startup that started in the computer vision space. They had actually developed a data labeling platform to help label computer vision models. That then got to kind of that next phase is now you can label, what do you do with it? And so we actually developed with my now current CTO, Joe Sherman. That's where I met him at this last company. And we co-developed some technology that allowed us to track people across random security cameras, let's say in a city or whatnot, and allow us to do that without the use of face or gait recognition. So we'd initially truly developed this for national security purposes to allow to do counterterrorism missions. If you kind of think back to the Boston Marathon bombings many years ago now, the investigators immediately went and pulled video because now there were cameras everywhere. The problem is they were drowning in this camera data, and even if they found one of those brothers on one of the cameras, then they had to manually go through and pull them on all the others. So we just developed technology that allowed you to basically double click on that person, and it would find them in all of the video cameras, even if their back was to the camera, even if they were wearing a COVID mask, a hat, glasses, all the above. Super cool technology, like definitely straight out of the movies. In fact, the other day, it was maybe a year ago, my co-founder was watching the most recent Mission Impossible movie, and there was some parts in there that literally came out of the technology that we had developed like 4 years earlier. So it's just cool to kind of see that play out, that we were ahead of Hollywood in this moment. We developed this technology. We started, with the government using it. That then we saw a lot of theft, unfortunately, happening in the retail space during COVID and some of the riots that were going on. And so some of the retailers came in and said, we want to put this and track down like who stole things from our stores. And it wasn't soon after that that all of a sudden the retailers themselves said, hold on, with this technology, you could help us get really granular insights into who's doing what in our malls or shopping centers, but do so in a way where you're not actually violating privacy. So I actually wouldn't know that it was you, Casey Larkin, that was in Apple. I would just know that you were a unique person, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that you went from there to another place. And that was really where the whole technology did a pivot there. I just realized for myself that it was a great use of technology, but I wasn't personally passionate about making mall operators richer. And so I just like, I need to do something else. So I
Yeah.
gave my CEO at the time a 6-month heads up and was like, you got me for 6 more months, but in that 6 months, I'm going to figure out what to do next. And that really set me off on a path to figure that out. We had some bad ideas early on. There was some, like, I
Give me
really
one.
enjoyed staying around the world in Airbnbs, but I always had a pain point when I got there. I wish there was more amenities inside, like,
Okay.
maybe a cold beer in the fridge or some creamer for your coffee or whatever it might have been. And I was like, wouldn't it be great if you just showed up and it was done? We kind of investigated that idea for a little while, decided that was going to be a huge logistical headache, which is really like funny that when I was
Right.
thinking about how a logistical headache it would be, I ended up getting into logistics, kind of stumbled in. But what I would say is the transition really was me. I always had a rule for myself when I was at CIA that I always wanted to go serve in a country that was listed above the fold of a newspaper. When you pulled up the Washington Post, it was there almost every day. Because that mean people cared, American public cared, the president cared, Congress cared. And when I opened up the newspaper in my search, this was in the middle of COVID still, and we saw 2 words displayed over almost every top headline. That was supply chain, whether it
Oh
was
yeah.
holdups, this and that, efficiencies, everything. And I just had no idea about the supply chain. But I realized like literally everything I'm drinking, wearing, sitting on must have come somehow on a truck at least. And if you back that up, I was like, man, now I'm interested. Like, what's going on there? And so for those 6 months before I left, I just did customer discovery. I would call CEOs in
Right.
the industry and try to get in front of them just to ask questions. And it's that posture of humility. Hey, I don't understand this. I'm coming from outside the industry, but I have a different set of skill sets that might be applicable, but I need to figure that out. So what's going on? And there were just 2 trends that people would talk about every time I chat with them, and that's high fragmentation and high fraud in trucking. And it was just fragmentation, fraud, fragmentation, fraud. And what I realized is when I was in the intelligence community, secrets themselves are quite fragmented. They're literally, behind closed doors out
Right.
there. And it was
Need
our
to know.
job to go out and get those, gather them, and
Yeah.
bring those fragmented insights together as one coherent picture. So fragmentation, to make a clear picture, I knew. And then on the fraud piece, the difference between tracking down like, who's perpetrating fraud and who's perpetrating a potential terrorist attack, they're trying to cover their tracks. They're trying to hide in the shadows. They're trying to blend in until all of a sudden they pounce. And again, it was that confluence of fragmentation and fraud. And I was like, I think I can help. And turned to my co-founders, was like, you guys think we could do this? And we were like, well, we got to give it a shot. And that's what led to GenLogs.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think another piece of it was, we don't know where our stuff is generally, right? Like the visibility in our supply chain is super duper tough. Like if you look at China, conversely, they have a much better control. It's a state control, on what's going on at their ports with their supply chains. So I think knowing where our stuff is a really interesting piece of the pie, right?
Yeah.
I think I heard you talking about, if, God forbid, I think China wants to be in Taiwan by, 2027? We better know where our stuff is, and we better have a really strong grasp on, what's moving where, and, who can move what equipment in case we need to get stuff overseas, et cetera, et cetera. And then boats is another entire piece of the equation. I know former boss Craig Fuller talks about that a lot as well, but it really kind of ties into a lot of the problems people are saying about the freight market, right? It's like the data interoperability is a huge barrier to, getting us to this 21st century. And, it's going to be hard to use AI until we have really nice structured data sets in a way for that information to flow freely. I think the hard part, or the interesting part, or I think a part that you guys are kind of solving, at least anyways, is, providing that data in more of a capitalist society, right?
Yeah.
Being a private player as opposed to a government entity, developing the data source. But it seems like we're kind of far behind, and it's cool to see folks like you guys, taking it on the chin and deciding to kind of solve the problem. It must have been hard for a guy like you gathering this information in the field. You've got an entrepreneurial spirit, and the CIA is not removed from organizational inertia theorem, right? They've been around for a long time. The bigger organizations get, the slower they move, and you're working your way up, right? You're not the guy running it.
Yeah.
Was that a learning experience? Was that hard for you sometimes to maybe have ideas and not be able to follow up on them, or just like
Yeah,
maybe time better? Or...
I will say to the CIA's credit, they impart a lot of ownership and autonomy to the individual operators. And I was kind of shocked that I joined when I was still like relatively young. And I just remember walking through the doors, and like soon after they were like, all right, here's access to incredibly top secret things. And we're going to go ahead and empower you to go overseas and do these operations and collect information, where the very next day, the president of the United States is reading what you collected. And it's kind of up to you to figure it out. I mean, they give you a lot of training. They give you the rule book in terms of, here's the tradecraft you should employ. But at the end of the day, it's you figuring this out. And there was one Middle Eastern country that was engaged in a lot of conflict, and we were kind of surrounded by Al-Qaeda, that I went into. We were opening up a new location there. My best friend at the time, and still close to this day, had arrived a few weeks ahead of me. And he ended up picking me up from the airport. And literally he was like, hey, Ryan, you got your, there's a map in the glove compartment, your M4, your machine guns under the back seat. You got a bag of money here, and we have a huge mission, and that's go to defeat Al-Qaeda. And that was it. And it was kind of us to figure that out. So in the right ways, I had a lot of flexibility and autonomy. But then when there were ways that I saw institutionally that, if we made these changes, the whole of CIA could operate a little bit quicker and better. And then that's where you do hear that bureaucratic inertia. Like as awesome as the CIA is and can respond so much quicker than a lot of the government agencies, it's still a government agency. There's still bureaucracy. And I think that's where I just had some trouble kind of operating in that system from the long term. And I just was like, well, if I don't do this now to go build something myself from scratch and try to shake up how things have been done, I probably never will. And I didn't want to be on my deathbed eventually looking back saying I wish I had done X, Y, Z. So that certainly kind of pushed me in that direction. If I can go back to what you were talking about, China, they've been pretty clear that they want to at least be in a military position to take Taiwan in 2027. And I think it's from a policy perspective, it is an open question whether the United States would intervene at that point in time and risk going to war with China. But you talked about Craig Fuller, and I know recently he's been all about the reindustrialization of America, something I support wholeheartedly. And I think we have some interesting historic parallels we can go look back. If we literally go back in time to World War II, where the world was now at war. Well, right before World War II, Boeing, I remember they ran an ad extolling the fact that they could produce a B-17. That's what my grandfather flew, a Flying Fortress, every 4 days, which is actually pretty incredible when you think about it. Every 4 days, one of these airplanes coming off the assembly line. Well, with there being 52 weeks in a year, that's about 200 at max capacity that Boeing could produce of these Flying Fortresses, the B-17 then. The problem was by the end of World War II, we have lost 4,735 or something like that B-17s there. So we were losing about 1,000 a year, but only had the capacity to produce 200 a year. And so in order to actually get to the point that we could be competitive on the global scale, take on the Axis powers there, we had to figure out how we were going to ramp up capacity. And that was going to be requiring both obviously inbound trucks or some capacity, whether it's rail or trucking, to get all of that raw material to these Boeing plants. It was going to require us to build better manufacturing facilities. But in the end of the day, maybe like the B-17s themselves could fly off the tarmacs after you produce them. But any other kind of war machine, whether it was a tank or a truck or whatever that might be going overseas, you're going to have to get that now from your inland manufacturing facilities back to the coasts on ships and overseas. It's a huge logistical headache. And I just feel like it took us a few years there to figure that out. And certainly, I mean, to Boeing's credit and to the other types of flight companies out there that kind of all banded together, by the end of the war, Boeing was able to go from one of these made every 4 days to now producing 16 per day. Awesome. Like, we did it, but that was only because like manufacturing or assembling is one thing, but getting everything to that plant, making all that happen, and then getting that stuff away from the plant was a logistical hurdle that took 4 years to basically build that up. The way that warfare operates now, we're not going to have that time. We're not going to have 4 years. Right. If we ever got into a global conflict, it's gonna kick off. We're gonna have to respond really quickly. And this is where I think, like, I want GenLogs to be well positioned to play that role. That if the maxim is true that a third of all trucks on the road are running empty miles, and that's really the Uber Freight came out with a study in 2023 which said that if 1/3 of the miles are empty, that means we have a third of capacity that any given time we could surge into to get tanks and supplies and other things to the ports and get them over into the Pacific if we need to. Right now, I just think we would struggle to do that. There would kind of like, how do you connect the dots? You have load boards that people could post like, hey, I need to move this stuff. Trying to get carriers, and it's the everyday like issue there. And I just want us to be able to play offense using a sniper rifle, basically, where we know exactly the right truck, right place, right time, right equipment, so that we could then surge to get stuff to where it needs to get around the globe.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting. And, I guess kind of have to agree with you that China is, I don't know, the scariest foreign entity that, I think about these days anyways. But, anybody in the audience out there right now have any questions for Ryan Joyce, former CIA operative? Seems like we got some folks watching here.
And while we're waiting, I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my abilities. There'll be things I can't share, but I'm curious, Casey, from your perspective. We just saw like Trump's announces 25% tariffs, what's coming over Mexico and Canada. If you were a betting man and had to say on January 21st if that'll go live, what's your bet now?
Not a chance.
Not a chance. You've heard it here.
How I think I already saw Trudeau and the president of Mexico both making concessions already about tightening up the borders. I think it's a negotiation tactic. An arrow in the quiver, if you will, as we try to reindustrialize America and make other folks pay their own share, especially our neighbors. So I think
I did think I saw the president of Mexico was like, maybe you should stop doing fentanyl. So,
right.
Little supply and demand issue there on the demand side.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know that you can necessarily win that war. But I mean, it's the precursors coming from China being manufactured in South America, right? That are coming up across the border and taking folks out.
No doubt. I mean, that is certainly an issue. And look, I'm all about I think we need to solve fentanyl and drug and any type of gun and drug trafficking. Like, really at its core, we talk about this a lot inside of GenLogs. Like, in an ideal, if GenLogs is fully successful, the bad actors cease to be around and all the good guys can flourish. And, I think it's painful every time that, there's issues that, headlines talk about fentanyl found in trucks or human smuggling and this and that. I remember a few years ago, there was a full trailer of people that died within a Walmart parking lot that was just abandoned there. And, there are bad actors out there. And I think we would do really well if we could stop that from happening. So the only people left were the good guys, who more freight coming their way, less fraud. Like, that's a world that I think everyone listening would want to operate in. And so GenLogs doing our part by collecting intelligence to help make that a reality.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think that there's a world now in trucking where it's really hard to get business from a bigger or new broker. The barrier to entry is so high. People are so conscious of the fraud risk that it's hard to know who's who, right? And that's a thing that I think folks have been missing, and I think will add a lot of value. Is like, we have lists that determine who the bad guys are. Like, I'm thinking it would make a lot of sense to have lists that determine who the good guys are.
Yeah.
And if you know who the good guys are, you just not to deal with the bad guys, right?
Yeah, and I think there's some great companies that are operating in that space, obviously, on the carrier vetting side and beyond, where 99% of those out there are good guys. And
right.
I think it's
a
just
bad name from those headlines, right?
It's the 1%. And I saw that, frankly, in my time spent abroad. I think it's unfortunate, like, every time after, whether it was after 9/11 or beyond, there was kind of the sentiment around like, let's blow off the Middle East off the map, and like they're all terrorists and this and that. And the reality is a much more nuanced approach as you go there. It's extremely hospitable people that want to welcome you, that have zero desire for violence. And I would sit every day and drink tea and laugh and joke and this and that. And yet there was a small percentage of bad actors that not only were a threat to the United States, they were a threat to whatever Middle Eastern country I would be in. And I think that nuance is important, that you're not trying to not everyone is bad. And you need to almost start with the premise being like, they're probably a good carrier, but let's prove that out, and trust but verify type thing. Like, we're gonna trust you, but we just need to make sure you're not bad. And so if you start with that perspective of trust, and we provide better data to make those assessments, working hand in hand with some of the carrier onboarding platforms, that's really where we want to get to.
Right. Yeah. Innocent until proven guilty, right? I mean, it's America after all. The one thing that is interesting about this, right, is the anonymization, right, of the data, right, or the privacy data that truck drivers have. And it sounds like you guys have thought about that. You definitely thought about it in the retail instance you were talking about earlier. But it seems like, from a sentiment perspective, right, the trucker is a don't tread on me guy. I don't want to share my data with anybody guy. But at the same time, it's like, I'm getting such a bad rap. It's so hard being a trucker. So the privacy piece is a barrier, right? You got to start to develop a record for yourself, hypothetically, to show, this is my resume. This is who I am. This is what I've done.
Well, I think it's difficult too, especially in an era where, if you are a new owner operator, brand new authority, you can't just go and ask for an inspection, and I just pulled each week we pull the number of carriers that GenLogs has observed on the road multiple times that has never had an inspection. And I think this past week it was 4,135. So that's 4,135 carriers that are out there trying to get business, that have never been seen in terms of by an inspector. And that's really the only way that data is publicly available, shared, that people have traditionally used to validate that this is a real carrier on the roads with assets, and not an assetless double broker that is sitting over in Eastern Europe just defrauding and stealing. And so we're very empathetic to the plight of truckers writ large, and owner operators and smaller carriers in specifically. And really, when we built GenLogs, we wanted to do so in a way that completely respected the privacy of those that are out in the roads. So one thing we do is we filter out all private vehicles at the edge. So that's like, we're not collecting on any your truck or my car or whatever it might be. It's not being collected on in terms of pickup truck. We then go a step further and we treat every truck as if it's autonomous, meaning I don't know who's driving. I literally don't care who's driving. I just care that a carrier had an asset at a time and place. And we see that enough over time, and it provides a pretty rich picture without violating who that carrier was serving at the time. So we don't like ever associate the carrier with the customer so that they feel like exposed either on the customer side or the carrier side. Then we go a step further and we provide 3 basic ways that we help carriers without them needing to pay, without them needing to like sign up to do anything. And number 1 is, we just announced this last week, is if you are a carrier, or frankly anyone in the industry, and you have a asset go missing or stolen, we will help investigate it, track it down, recover it for free. End stop. You're not going to get an invoice. You're not going to, ask for a pound of flesh. Nothing. You come to us, and we just, there was I saw that Dooner was thrown out there I guess yesterday, that I think his name was Casey Jordan down in Houston, just had his brand new, like literally had just bought a brand new power unit, had parked it at a TA stop for like 2 weeks, was paying for parking there, and his wife came back and it was gone. And they reviewed the tapes, and sure enough, you see someone breaking in through the passenger door, stealing it, and it's out. And we're trying to track him down. Fortunately, someone stepped in and just gifted him a new power unit, which is awesome. Like, talk about the holiday spirit. Yeah, I mean, that's the at least on the positive side, that's how it all came, is that someone just gifted him a replacement. But we were trying to track him down because we were going to we need a little bit of data in terms of, hey, what's your MC and what was some other identifying markers of it so we could find it. But our plan still, if he's listening to this or someone can get in contact with him, we'll track it down, we'll figure out what happened, and hopefully recover it, put it back in his hands, and we're just going to not ask for anything from him. And we'll do that for everyone out there on the road. So 1, you get like free Overwatch. Number 2 is, we've observed many incidences now, unfortunately, where there's a TIA watchdog or a freight card report filed in a carrier, and that carrier is actually a victim of identity theft, where someone is actually out there operating on the roads with their MC, like, plaqued on or smacked on with some duct tape on the side of a truck. And they use that to go in and steal a load. And sure enough, the video evidence seemed to suggest, like, that's the carrier. We got him. Here's the MC. And it was just someone else posing as. Well, if we know what a carrier's registered units are with FMCSA, and then we know what we're actually seeing on the roads, we can actually flag a divergence and get ahead of some of those issues by saying someone is impersonating you on the roads. And that's certainly one way we help. And then lastly, I've already kind of highlighted it, is with those 4,135 carriers and growing each week, we are providing data points that they are real and that they have real assets and they're out on the roads doing God's work without them needing to go get an inspection. And hopefully over time we can change broker behavior, where if they see that these carriers are out there and they understand like their authority, maybe it's not a full year, but maybe it's been like 9 months, 6 months or whatnot, but they've seen a lot of activity on a lane with the right equipment type that they're looking for, that they can lower that bar, that you don't need to be inspected and a year of authority before they'll work with you, that they can actually lower the bar thanks to GenLogs and get more freight into that owner operator's hands. So those are the ways that, like, we absolutely respect privacy and we take it a step further to actually help without knowing who you are.
Right, exactly. And then I guess, I don't know, maybe a 4th one is just the benefit they get from, the brokers having this technology and being able to find them potentially in, the backhaul markets where they typically be deadheading a couple 100 miles back home or to another city to get a load. Asset utilization's got to go up with a tool like this.
100%. And, we've made, so we've got some stickers that we've circulated around GenLogs. It's death to deadheads. And, that's like, at the end of the day, we'd love to eliminate all the deadheads.
Is there a little play on the Grateful Dead deadhead with the sticker?
It is. It is. So, yeah, I got one in the other room. I'll mail you one. But yeah, that's absolutely true. And we've seen that from our users a lot. In fact, obviously we're seeing all the searches that are being made in the back end. But then we'll get, inbound from a customer saying, hey, I just want to let you know, like, I've been searching for 3 months for a dedicated, carrier on this lane, and I had been struggling to find capacity there. And I used the GenLogs platform. Within minutes, I found a great carrier. That carrier's now benefited because they were running, loads for a shipper and struggling to find backhauls. Maybe the market was just like a bad market, that there weren't a lot of backhauls, but this broker had them, and now they're able to find each other. And that's what the platform at the end of the day. So I agree with you. That is the fourth way, and probably most important way to the average owner operator, potentially like a little bit like, whoa, how'd you find me? But that's what it's designed to do, is that you get a call and freight's kind of dropped in your lap where you really need it the most.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And to I guess the broker's benefit, they may, now that they know who the carrier is in that lane and the shipper asked them to price that, they haven't been able to do it in the past because they don't have any historical, they haven't been able to find a truck. Having that information on who the truck is at least gives you a chance to figure out, what it might cost you to move that load for the customer. And helps, you get a piece of freight, get you a load that, you weren't otherwise qualified for. I know I have a friend from high school, a guy named Patrick Budarazzi, who works at Fusion Transportation, and I think he runs one of their offices. And he's like, hey, man, you have any data that might be able to help me? We're trying to get freight in and out of some small city in Texas, and not able to price it, right? We don't have any data on that, so I can't help my customer. I got to tell them to, go pound sand in that instance. I wish that I had some data there to help. And I guess really cool that you guys are providing the connection, I guess, from your perspective, to make it easier, to make brokers and carriers have more assumptions going into a sales call, right? I guess it is a prospecting tool at the end of the day, but it's funny. That is something that all the great companies do. Highway, right, just came first in freight tech. They are synonymous with the fraud problem, right? Queued. Can't go to a conference without seeing a sticky note on all the urinals and knowing that they're going to save you time booking loads. So I think that's what it's all about, man. Connecting the dots, making life a little bit easier for folks to move the freight, the minutia, the data entry, the prospecting, calling for carriers, kind of haphazardly figuring out where assets are, and then using that information to then go tell folks what you can or can't move loads, where you can't move loads, is not the most efficient way to do it. So it's really cool to see you guys and this whole kind of wave of freight tech 2.0 companies that seem to be hot right now. Some of the AI companies are really bridging the gaps and bringing decision-making opportunities to the forefront, connecting people where they should be connected, and let the people, do what you hired them for.
I do want to say, like, at the end of the day, what we are not, like, there's two ways to use AI. One is to like completely replace people, and the other is to make people more efficient so they can get 10x productivity out. GenLogs is firmly in that latter camp. And as a former human intelligence operative, like I know the power of human relationships, and I know the power of that interpersonal discussions and all the above. And that's what I really want to leverage, or to give that superpower to our customers. This is almost a year ago now that I was watching a podcast where Reed from Lost Freight was on it. He was talking about his background when he was at Echo as a carrier sales rep, what his day-to-day was like. And, he talked about the first 4 hours of the day, he'd be picking up the phone and he'd be making calls to carriers saying, hey, where are your trucks? What backhauls do you need? What equipment do you have? This and that. He's just kind of like the first 4 hours of their day, calling. And I just was like, man, that's a lot. And if you could now have all of that at your fingertips, where you just know, then you get straight to the the actual relationships assigning freight piece, because you already know those questions and you don't have to do the 4 hours of calling to just cut to the chase. And that's really the vision at GenLogs is, yes, in many ways it is a prospecting tool, whether you're looking for shippers or carriers, we're going to have data in there, but it's to shortcut all of the work that other people might, like the really good ones, are going to have to do up front to even get to connecting with the right shipper, connecting with the right carrier. We're going to give you that data at your fingertips. And now you're going to just do like that boom, I'm going to make that call. I'm going to sign the load. I'm going to, start pushing on that shipper on that lane that I know that they run and I know they need help on, because GenLogs is watching it in the data. That's what we ultimately want to be. You mentioned some great companies, Highway, Queued, Fairlanes. Like GenLogs is all about partnerships, and I think we're in a really interesting position where we have data that others don't have, but we want to use it in a way that actually makes this really complementary to other great tech companies that are out there. Exactly. And you mentioned earlier, like we are doing nothing with rates on lanes. We have data that might help inform those, but we're not trying to, we're not giving like, here's the rate on this lane versus this lane. Like you guys do that really well. There's others in the space. We didn't want to enter into a crowded space there. We wanted to do something different that would just provide better data, better intelligence, and better insights ultimately, so that everyone could do this better. I'll kind of close on this like little tangent here to say, I've just been really impressed with this industry. Like, is there competition? There is. It's a free market. Like people are going to be, it is absolutely like Procter and Gamble is only going to have so much freight per year, and that's only going to go to, a set number of companies. And yet, all of the industries I've looked at, this has been like the most helpful across companies and even traditional competitors. There's a little bit of like, hey, I'm rooting for you, because when we're in a downturn like this, you want everyone to not only survive, but to flourish in an ideal world.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting too. I mean, to go back to like you coming from outside of the industry, it's a rather insular industry too. And breaking into that is not easy for a lot of folks to do. I think if you take the right tact, right, you ask curious, genuine, intellectually honest questions, then you can open some doors and you can break into spaces that might otherwise be hard. It's funny. I mean, you come from your background, with the CIA and working with people. I got into sales and I didn't want to be a sales guy. Going into sales calls, the more information that I have about the person that I'm talking with, the better chance I have to not fall on my face and look like an idiot.
Yeah.
So, I'd never hop on a call with anybody without knowing, what is their background? What is their job title? What potentially motivates them? What could make their life easier? Maybe what do they do on the weekends for fun? Because, if I have that information, I've got a much better opportunity at having a good call and having them maybe want to buy something from me, as opposed to having to sell it to them. Right. And I think what you guys are giving people the tools to do here as a brokerage is ask the right questions to the right shipper, where you have the ability to deliver great service, right? Take kind of some of the operational stuff out of it and give like your people information they need to ask great questions and deliver value, be provocative, right? At the end of the day, it's very cool.
Yeah, fully agree. I mean, it is so easy to sell when it's going to solve a deep problem for someone, and that's ultimately like, we could take 250,000 shippers that are in the U.S. and tell you exactly which ones to start targeting now, because they have volume increasing on a lane, and yet it looks in the data that they don't have dedicated capacity, or where they're maybe struggling there one reason or another. We give you that insight. So when you call, it's not you trying to sell them something they don't need. They are drowning behind the scenes of trying to cover loads on a lane. And all of a sudden you're calling them to say, hey, we got some excess capacity. You need help there? Casey, thanks for calling, man. Here you go. Like, how quickly can I get you onboarded here? Because you just happened to call me on the day that I was literally dealing with like, where are we going to find this capacity? Exactly. And that's really what it's designed. Same thing on the carrier side is to think, that carrier, we'll see it in our data. We'll see like dedicated head hauls, and all of a sudden they're fighting for back hauls in the data back. And it's like, cool. We see this carrier has head hauls, no back hauls. And now you're about to call them and offer them those back hauls 3 times a week or whatnot there. I mean, it's just kind of like, that is a godsend, and they couldn't say yes quicker. And you're only going to have that if you're armed with great intelligence, great information. So it's 100%. I agree with you.
Yeah, for sure. How is the sensor network coming along? Can you give me a ballpark? How many you guys have up on the roads? Can you give me some kind of idea? I know you guys don't want to give away the playbook, but
yeah, what I'll tell you is more like, I always say this to customers. We could have 1 million ill-placed sensors and we would derive 0 impact for you. Or I can have one incredibly well-placed sensor that could be a game changer. And so I think people get caught up in the numbers. We're definitely like trending, triple digits, tending toward thousands here soon. So like, it's getting out there, and I'm so proud of the sensor deployment team that we have that is hammering that every day. And we're getting dozens out there now a week. And that's before we're about to triple our sensor deployment team in terms of size and scope to get them out. And we're about to quadruple the number of sensors over this next year. So like, we're betting the farm on this being that unique capability. And we're actually getting, absolutely getting that out there. A statistic I shared recently was just across a handful of customers within the last 4 months, we've helped them recover over 400 missing and stolen trailers. And so and for them, it was tripling to quadrupling the number of trailers that they recovered in all of 2023. They've now quadrupled that in just a few months in 2024. So the power is like undeniable if you're asset based and you're missing certain things. I will never go to sleep like probably satisfied with where we are, because there's always a little bit more we can collect. Some of the big things we're looking at over the next year is a lot on cross-border. So I agree with you. I think these tariffs are not going to come into play. I think we're going to see cross-border really escalate. And we're actually hiring a Mexico-focused team member to also place on the Mexico side of the border. So we will be getting coverage on both Mexico and the US and kind of seeing what's happening there. Also looking the same at Canada. Canada will come after Mexico though. And then there's a little bit that we're doing more in the intermodal and drayage space, where we're going to be deploying our sensors here in January at a major US port, and right at the gates, covering what's going in and out. And we're in talks with some of the class 1 rails to also do the same thing there. So when it comes to then really understanding like what carriers are operating in the drayage space, and what do those when freight enters the country, like you might get the BOL data and all of this, but then where does it go? And is it going 50 miles, 500, 1,000 miles there to the final destination? And really giving the intermediaries better understanding of, should this be going on roads? Should it be going on rail? And really understanding the 2 options, both for the rail operators, but also the IMCs working with the rail operators. That's where we talk about where we're going in 2025. That's where we're going to be going. It's going to be more sensors and more capabilities and features of the data that we're collecting with those sensors, but then also more unique areas where they're going into. We're going beyond just the middle mile to borders, ports, and rail.
That's awesome. It takes I think a really unique perspective like the one you had to come in and like try to solve this problem with cameras. A lot of other folks have, there are other great visibility companies out there that a lot of folks still have in their tech stack. I don't know if you guys, I know you guys have APIs and things like that. I mean, there's the, macro points, the P44s, the 4Kites of the world, but there's problems with manual data entry, right? At the end of the day, like there's camera, like picture is a source of truth, right? That I think makes it really unique. And the drayage piece, right? That coming off the boats, like it is so hard to know who those drayage carriers are. They don't factor their invoices. they stay
Still in
close
the
to home.
ELDs anyways. Yeah.
Very, very interesting piece of the pie. And I'm not going to ask you what port it is, even though I want to. But
It's southeast, I'll give you that much.
okay, all right. I think I
Yeah.
may have an idea.
There's a few main ones there, and hopefully we'll be with them all pretty soon.
I'm sure you guys will be.
Yeah.
That's very cool. One of my favorites down there was Savannah, the Georgia Ports Authority. They're great folks. I used to work with a lot of the ports when I was at Freightways. We acquired American Shipper, and that's kind of how I started in media sales, was taking over the book of business for American Shipper, and the ports were a big part of that book. Very interesting. So, anything else? I mean, I know that you're pretty much full into GenLogs these days. Probably don't have too much time for any other fun stuff. I do know that you're a Virginia guy, right? It's really interesting what Glenn Youngkin and Winsome Sears and Z-Box and you and Prasad. I mean, there's 10,000 startups in Virginia or something crazy like that. What is it? What's in the water? What is Virginia the new Silicon Valley?
Let's make it that way, is what I would say. Here's my commentary on it. I have a unique optic coming out of the intelligence community to see how many bright and hard-charging and dedicated Americans that could have done anything. They could have gone to any startup in Silicon Valley, and yet they decided they were going to sign up and serve their country. And they get, not only like do they do that, these are people that are like of high integrity. They pass a polygraph and they pass background checks. Then they enter the intelligence community and they get battle tested, man. I'm telling you, like, you need to get this done or lives are lost. And that'll really stretch you. And you'll learn how to operate in really high pace, fast paced environments. And these people do that for 5 to 10 years, and maybe longer, maybe shorter. But around the average length of time is around 10 years for someone in the intelligence community. And then they decide, all right, I'm ready for that next challenge. And that's where a lot of people, about 50% of people that will leave the intelligence community, will end up staying in the Northern Virginia, DC, into like Maryland area, but heavily slanted into Northern Virginia. Huh. And I would say, like, I'm one of those, but there's many others that leave and then either start or join startups. And I think that we're seeing that proliferation here. I was with Cargo Sense the other day on their podcast chatting. Those are amazing teams sitting here just down the road from me here. We had Prasad Golapalli from Trucker Tools, started in the Northern Virginia area. Like you said, there's Z-Box. And yeah, Glenn Youngkin, when he came into office, he pledged to create 10,000 high growth startups in Virginia, and then just spoke a few months ago that we had hit that number. I'm really bullish on where this industry is. In fact, I was just thinking, like, it's long overdue to get a dinner of all of the founders that are in the supply chain space here. I know a handful of other Dhruv from Drumkit is in the area too. So it's really cool, man. It's like we're never going to be as hot as Chicago or Chattanooga with regards to the enormity of the brokerages and others that could fuel that. But in terms of the tech talent and the bright entrepreneurial spirit, I couldn't speak more than of what you're seeing in Virginia right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And yeah, I mean, those folks that worked in that world for 5 or 10 years, they come out with a super unique experience that could probably be, I know it was probably really valuable to the nation and national defense, working for whatever agency they were a part of. But I don't know, man, I'm a cold-blooded American, and I think that, that they're probably just as, if not more valuable, working in the private market, trying to solve problems, working for guys like you instead of, it's just hard at these big organizations, right? We need them, and, that's for sure. But it's really cool to see that you guys have a really cool talent pool to pick from there.
Well, let me throw this out, because I have plenty of friends that are still in the intelligence community, but also thousands in my Rolodex that are now out. If you are in the space and you're looking to hire some of the most hard-charging entrepreneurial folks, you'll ever seen, please reach out to me. And I'd love to connect you with some of these folks that are looking to transition. I think the military does a really good job, for the most part, of having career transition programs. And there's some great organizations like the Honor Foundation and Commit and others that help veterans when they're ready to like put up their boots and go into the private sector. They will hold their hand through resume reviews, how to dress, what do you do like when you don't own a suit? What do you need to do? Like all of that, they'll walk them through. The intelligence community just hasn't done a great job of that. And so there's been like some folks that have done that on their own accord that have said, we're just going to help each other. And I'm connected within that effort and would be more than happy. In fact, I've already connected a few folks from the intelligence community into supply chain startups. I won't name who they are, but they scored big with hiring these folks. So if you have any needs, reach out and I'd be happy to like go through my Rolodex and connect you.
Let's do it. I love it. I'm certainly bullish on the freight tech landscape. It's such a segmented market, right? It's kind of a final frontier. Cool to see us, kind of starting to move a little bit more quickly towards the 21st century, if you will. One of the guys that is I don't know if he's in Virginia or not, but that I've come across on podcasts, Andrew Bustamante. He's come out with some stuff. Have you ran into him?
I do know Andrew. Yep.
Yeah, seems like a great guy. Some awesome podcasts that I've seen of his. Anywho, folks should check him out if they're trying to learn how to, sell like a spy, I guess, if you will.
I like to joke that if you can sell trees, and you can sell a really good product. And at the end of the day, like that's what part of the process was as a human intelligence officer, was trying to convince people to give us their secrets. And, when you can actually walk someone through to do that, if you have a great product behind you, it's the friction's removed to kind of say, hey, this is not going to hurt you. It's only going to help you. And that's pretty powerful. So yeah, there's definitely, I would say like at the end of the day, there isn't a lot of tools or tricks of the trade. There's no Jedi mind tricks that like the CIA uses to do anything. There's no coercion, no blackmail. And that's what I actually loved about it. Right. But what we did have, like the people that were most successful were the most empathetic, end stop. And it was the people that frankly listened more than they talked. And it's like really difficult for me to go on this, like on dude, what's the bid?
Right.
Yeah. Pepper you with questions for an hour. Cause trust me, I could. And I love to get to know people. I love to get to know what makes you tick. And I love to know like, what are you struggling with right now? And how can I help? And I think those were the most successful intelligence operators, were the ones that had the highest levels of empathy. And so I said that at the beginning of the hour. I'll kind of end it now. Like at GenLogs, if you have any desire to work at GenLogs, we'd love to talk to you. We're not like right now, we're not in an active like hiring boom, but it comes and goes. But we will only hire those that have, are really just hungry out to get it. Like they have an internal drive that doesn't come from anywhere but themselves. They don't need to be motivated. They're self-motivated. They're humble and they're empathetic and they ask questions and they realize they don't know all the answers. And they're also like incredibly intelligent and can figure it out, because we're going to give you, it's really autonomous. We're going to say, here's the direction we need you to go. And you need to figure it out, because no one's here looking over your shoulder telling you what to do. And that's what I think the CIA does great for, is hiring those types of folks. And that's what we've really prioritized for who we're hiring as well.
Yeah, it's really insightful when you put it like that. It's hard to sell somebody something unless you know what their problems are, right? Yeah. Somebody's not going to tell you their problems unless you empathize with them and they can trust you.
It drives me nuts all the time. These LinkedIn, outreach of just straight up like, hey, we do UX UI services. Do you need it? And it's like, whoa. Like, hey, how are you doing?
Dinner first,
right? Like, yeah. And how about you get to know me? And I realize it's hard. Like LinkedIn outreach, highly inefficient. I think, frankly, it's like a dead art to be able to do that well. But yeah, I think where I've succeeded the most is just by like having an initial call without really any desire to sell. Like, we didn't have anything to sell for the longest time. And there's some industry stalwarts that really have become close mentors of mine, who I've certainly now over time been able to help them and put something in their hands. But more importantly, they've been able to help me. For a guy that didn't know freight, for me to call them up and say, like Dave Roaring over at NFI, hey, Dave, explain this to me. Like, why is this a problem? Why hasn't this been solved? Like, let's chat through this. Or, I always joke that I still don't know like what an ERP does, and an EDI, and like all these things. And I'm like, I know how to collect data and I know how to package that up so it's powerful. You need to walk me through then how this, where that connective tissue needs to happen. And so yeah, it's empathy is so like it's a lost art, unfortunately. People like to talk a lot without listening. If I'm not being forced to do it on these, like joining some of these programs, man, I'm sitting and observing and listening and trying to better understand.
Yeah, for sure. It's a fun game to see how long you can go on a sales call without saying anything, just asking questions. But anyways, Ryan, it's really been a pleasure. I know you're a very busy guy and you got some other stuff to do. Would love to get from you before you jet, unless there's any other topics. Who's your favorite band, and what is your favorite piece of spy media? I know we talked about The Americans. That could be a favorite of mine. I know there's some good movies.
Yeah. So my answer to that second question is actually going to be counterintuitive, because it's not an actual spy movie, but it captures so well the psychology of human intelligence. And that is The Departed, with Leonardo DiCaprio and with Mark Wahlberg. And you got Jack Nicholson in that. It's this idea that that Leonardo DiCaprio is an undercover cop and he's within the Boston Mafia. And, there's some tradecraft involved, but there's also that deep psychology of he knows what he is, who he is, but he's having to pretend while he's part of this group. And there's a lot of that gets into handling like human sources and their kind of the divide between who their family even thinks they are and who they actually are. Outside of that, I just thought Spy Game with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt, great classic movie. So if I had to go straight spy genre, I'd give you that. And as far as favorite brand, lesser known, but everyone should check them out, Need to Breathe. Good American rock, and love that band. I think Bear Reinhardt, who's lead singer, has one of the most amazing voices that probably God has ever gifted. And so, yeah, Need to Breathe would be my my top band.
Very cool. I will check them out.
Very cool. Well, hey, Casey, it was awesome to join you again today. And hopefully you have a happy Thanksgiving.
Likewise. Yeah, gobble, gobble. Enjoy some turkey. Yeah, be a lovely Thanksgiving, and really appreciate you coming on again, Ryan. So
have you had a returning guest for the third time yet, or do I need to kind of beat people to the punch there?
You may need to be the first thrice recurring guest if you're up for it.
Only if Kevin will join us next time. So we'll make that happen.
You hear that, Kevin?
Yeah, we'll do it. But it's been a pleasure, and yeah, the industry's just been so welcoming. It's been great to be here. So thanks so much.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Ryan. Talk soon.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.